Here we are. All right. Welcome, everyone, to Prog Will Find a Way, Progcast. We're in yet another new environment.
Yes.
We're at my house this time on the Prog couch.
The Prog couch. Ay, ay, ay.
So, few topics today, but want to start with, I don't know if it's really news as much as anniversaries, 50th anniversaries of a number of iconic albums. Well, many, many iconic albums, but on kind of the byways of Prog and the birth of Prog, we were just chatting beforehand and figured we'd bring it on. We'd bring it on to the podcast talking about the Beatles. Beatles Atmos releases of the Red compilation and the Blue compilation. I know growing up, the Blue one I remember a lot. Like I remember listening to that. I think I had that one. I had Magical Mystery Tour and something else.
I think
Hard Day's Night.
Oh, I think the Red and the Blue were my first two albums that I got by the Beatles.
But they were just packed with just killer tunes.
Everything was fantastic.
Yeah.
On those. I mean, you just went from song to song to song. And I love that it was like the history of the Beatles all on those like 4 discs.
And just great songs. But I was kind of on Apple Music a couple of weeks ago and noticed that they had been released. Not and it's not just Atmos, but so on the Blue album they put the new Beatles song that we'll get
that's
to.
on there.
That's on the Blue
okay.
The Blue one. But they expanded both of them.
Oh, they did.
They did. They added, I don't know, maybe 8 to 10 tracks to them, and they didn't just put them on the end. They added them throughout chronologically. So now, I mean, they were great before, but now all the songs that it was like, oh, they were 80 or 90% there because they were missing a couple of songs that some, that
key songs
that people liked.
Sure.
Well, now those are on plus more. So, and I don't think it detracts from it at all. I think it's very, very cool. And it's cool to hear it in Atmos. My biggest surprise was the Red one. I've been listening just to the Red one because they hadn't gone back and re-released those yet or remixed those. So they did all that. It's all been remixed. Okay. Whereas on the Blue album, it's all the remixes from those releases like Sgt. Pepper a few years ago.
That they've been doing slowly but surely when they do those deluxe box sets of each one.
So now they just did most of the songs it looked like on the Red album, and they're in Atmos. So
they're in Atmos, so there is a physical release.
As far as I know, there's physical releases too. I've seen pictures of. They look more like LP boxes, so I don't know. But you can't have a Dolby Atmos mix on an LP.
No, I'm sure that it's an LP with the DVD or the Blu-ray and the CDs and the whole thing. Yeah. Just like they did for the Abbey Road for box set for the Sgt. Pepper's album. For the White Album, Let It Be. Yeah. I mean, they've been, and I think they did Revolver too.
Revolver, yeah, but they didn't go back. Yeah, that's why on those songs that are on the Red compilation, as well as the extra ones that they pulled, those are all now, I think it says either 2022 or 2023 remix right next to the tracks, but they sound great. I mean, it just sounds good. But yeah, and so of course there's the new Beatles song as well. I've heard it a couple of times. To be honest, I had the same reaction I had. It's hard to think that this is a long time ago, right? But the anthology series, remember that was such a big deal when it came out. And that's a long time ago, 20 years, if not more. It's a long time.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly. I remember getting those little CD box sets when they came out.
They would each come out.
Albums,
right? And I think, but...
So it was like Free as a Bird.
Free as a Bird
on those.
It was on the anthology, and there was one of the other. Was it Mighty Love or something? I don't know. I apologize. Free as a Bird's the one I remember, but I had the same reaction to the new one. I was like, oh, interesting, but probably maybe more of a negative one this time because it's so far removed from.
Yeah, and the song is fine. It's the Beatles, so everybody is excited about it, but it didn't really grab me.
I think the difference this time too is those songs like Free as a Bird, I mean, George was still around, but they had worked on that song as a band. Like I think there were tracks as a band, if I'm not mistaken, but this particular track, this was just a John Lennon song, and they got a tape of it and they added things to it.
Yeah, but I I think George had put guitars on it prior to his passing,
right.
but I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I did. Because all of them are on it in some fashion.
Right. And it sounds like the Beatles. That's the weird...
It does.
You know.
It's just, I don't think it's one of their stronger writing efforts.
Right. Yeah, I know there's some unreleased stuff people would like to see, as opposed to the kind of new and reimagined kind of things. But yeah, so it's part of the canon now. It's on the Blue, it's the last thing on the Blue album. So until whatever anniversary, and then they'll go back the 75th anniversary where it's just the original. It's only released on album, and it's just the tracks that were there.
Oh, nice.
So, but yes, 1973, that was a pretty big year for Prog.
It was a huge Prog year.
Yeah, I have some props here from 73-ish, or facsimiles of. So, Brain Cell Surgery, the reason why all of a sudden I was like, oh yeah, it's because I heard Carnival 9, the entire thing on Sirius XM today, and the DJ was like, yeah, we're going to play this now because it's the 50th anniversary of, and I was like, wow, okay. But so we had that album, we had Lark's Tongues and Aspic. This is the reissue, so although I do have an original. Then we have we couldn't be bothered having the album, so we have the booklet for Yes Songs.
Yes Songs, yes, which was a May 73 release, which was the triple live album from the Close to the Edge and Fragile tours, and that was my my second intro to Yes. So first I got Tormato, which was, we talked about in our first episode, and then the next album I got was Yes Song. So that was an eye opener for me after Tormato.
Right. Yeah.
Like, holy cow.
Yeah. And it's funny to imagine that it's only like, was it 5-6 year difference between the two?
Right.
But now it seems like a lifetime. I mean, it's such a different band,
but also just it's just a different listening experience because it was the live album, right? So it's a little rougher and which I like about it, because I had not heard to that point any of the studio cuts of those songs. So my first intro to them was all this live stuff.
Okay, with Alan White,
or Bruford on the 3 songs that he's on or whatever. Perpetual Change and Long Distance and the Fish.
Right.
But that really got me in. And then the album cover, the gatefold sleeve that opened up with all the Roger Dean stuff on it. I was just like, wow, this.
And the booklet.
This is my band now.
Yes. And the capes.
I don't know about the capes, but I remember because this is in the days of like Betamax and stuff. My aunt and uncle had a Betamax machine, and the local video place had the Yes Songs movie, but they only had it in Betamax. So I had to go over their house, watch it. And I was like, wow.
Those were the days.
Those were the days.
Yeah. I mean, just such an iconic album.
Yeah.
Just the amount of songs. It was, I remember, I don't think I had the album, but my brother did, but I mean, I could never get through the 3 albums at once.
Oh,
I couldn't sit and get through all 3. It was just too. It was too heavy.
I don't know. Hello.
Yes, it's just taking over. We get Prog cat, and then of course. Well,
speaking of that, I think Roger Dean had a cat that walked all over his paintings.
He did. So this is apropos. The only other cover I have, because I don't have a large collection of albums. I am one of those people that fell in love with when CDs came. 83ish, 83, right? 83ish.
Yeah.
Boom, got rid of all the albums and you could still get good money for albums at that point. And but anyways, Peter Sinfield still, if nothing else, an amazing cover. Not a bad album, but funny.
I have that, but I
on Manticore.
I don't know
It's just such.
I don't know that album very well.
Yeah, I mean, we could debate the merits of the album, but really, all you have to do is listen to the title track. And the first half, you have Peter on vocals, and then all of a sudden Greg Lake comes in, and you're like, oh, wow, that's what somebody who can sing sounds like. No offense. Actually, I do love that album. Under the Sky is an amazing song. and the players are really good. But I don't think I'm sure Peter Sinfield would agree that his voice was not the strong point on that album.
Yeah.
But as the whole package with the gatefold and the whole 9 yards on Manticore,
which was the ELP label,
was great. So. What other albums from that? Well, Brain Style Surgery, of course, which was just freaking believable.
Yes. Hello.
Did you, one of the things I wanted to ask, because, come on, you don't ruin the shirt there. Okay, it's time to go.
It's not my fragile shirt.
It's not fragile. It's fragile. Like at that time, like were you listening to music in that period of time, like the sets?
In that early 70s? Yeah. No, if I was listening to music, it was in the backseat of my parents' car, listening to AM radio, and it was not. No, my first albums were. I think I got Led Zeppelin 4.
Okay, all right,
and Foreigner's first album. That's when I was starting to buy records. Was like 1978.
Okay, so was Foreigner was your door to Prague through the 6 degrees of separation with Ian McDonald?
No, those were my first 2 albums, and then I was listening to the Beatles like crazy, and then the Prague stuff was the gateway.
Okay, the gateway
with Tornado, and then it just all followed.
Right, the gateway to delirium.
Yes. Well, I always found it very interesting because along with like the Led Zeppelin thing, they didn't always put a lot of information on the actual record sleeve. Well, so it was like I was just looking at the records and trying to figure out, like, when I got Relayer, what's really on here, or Tales.
Right. There's no information at all.
There's not a lot of information.
I remember you could, go to Woolworths or Carl Graff's or any of those places, and they had cutout records. They were and they were $1.99 or $2.99, and you'd leaf through, or I would, and it'd be like, wow, that's a cool cover. Maybe I'll buy that. I don't know what's on.
For $2.
Or even worse, I'd look on the back and they'd have the titles. I wouldn't know anything about the band or the music, but they'd have how long the songs were. And if there was like, a 10-minute song and a 15-minute or a 20-minute song, it was like, whoa, this has got to be good. And I definitely discovered some bands this way, but I bought albums. But that was the way I bought an album.
The length of songs doesn't necessarily translate to quality.
Well, I did discover that. In some cases, I was very, very surprised. Like Nectar, the Prog. That's how I discovered them. The album cover, and I looked down the back, and I'm like, "It's one song on one side," and I'm just looking at the cover art. I'm like, "This is progressive. It has to be."
Yeah,
and it was. But yes, you could definitely hit some.
Some doozies.
Some doozies. But what else from 73? Passion Play, Jethro Tull, which to me, one of their better albums.
Genesis was
that was was
it Selling England? Was that 74? I can't remember.
It was, I think Selling was early 74, but Foxtrot was 72. So Genesis Live.
Okay.
But it's kind of the Selling England by the Pound era.
That doesn't have the impact of Yes songs.
No, it doesn't.
Because it's only a single album.
Selling England by the Pound had to be 73. I mean, we could just look it up.
We'll look it up. That's eventually.
Yeah. But we had the same discussion about Yes Songs. That it could be one of those where Yes Songs was released in the UK in 73, but it was in the US in 74.
Oh, no, that was Tales.
Tales. Oh, I'm sorry.
Tales was December 73 for UK, and then January 74 for the US. Which, that's unheard of nowadays because everything is on the internet and you get it immediately.
Exactly. Well,
luckily,
to find an import. Yeah, we're not popular enough. We won't get pillared for the fact yet that we're screwing up yet. Mark my words. All right. Any other noteworthy releases from that year you want to talk? I mean, there are a lot, but
no, we already talked about Tubular Bells.
Touche. Yes, we devoted a whole episode to Tubular Bells. All right, so let's bring it right up to the present, because the other thing I want to talk about is the Robert Fripp at Daryl Hall's,
yes,
Daryl's house, which I believe it was recorded last year. It wasn't recorded.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's not recent. I believe it was recorded almost a year ago, the end of 2022.
Oh, okay.
And because I think he records the whole season and then
releases
they've been putting it out. But if folks haven't seen or heard yet, Daryl Hall started this web show a very long time ago of live music and bringing people in essentially to his house, and people get fed and they just make music. It's really cool. Now he actually owns a club, a venue called Daryl's House. Very nice place.
Yeah, it's cool.
And so a new season has started after a break of, I think, a decade or almost.
Oh, really?
It's been a long time.
Okay.
This
is the
weird.
first one I've ever watched because I saw it and that it was out, and so I was like, I should check this out, and I found it really good. No, it was kind of fun because everyone thinks of Robert Fripp as this really serious guy because with Crimson he's sitting on his stool and just playing his guitar and barely acknowledging the audience. It is my general feeling of him from the shows that I've been to. But then this one, he's, grinning ear to ear the entire time. He's shocked at the level of musicianship of this band that's just picking up these songs and playing them.
Yep.
And he genuinely seems to have had a really good time at the recording and interaction with this. Now, Daryl and Robert go back like 40 years, right? So
then they talk about it during this. They met just down the road. At the backstage at a Hall and Oates show. Fripp says it was one time, and Daryl Hall, I think, said no, it was a couple of years earlier at a show. But anyways, and they I think if you're into this kind of music, then a couple of years later, when Fripp was starting to put together Exposure, hey, come sing. And of course, then Daryl wanted him to produce and play on
Sacred
Songs, and the record label didn't want Daryl all over Exposure. Was this whole thing, and then Peter Gabriel's album's in the mix too. Daryl Hall's not on that, but the nexus is Exposure. But yeah, they go way back, and I mean, Daryl Hall has just always been an amazing vocalist, and I have to say, it's everything you said, like seeing Fripp is relaxed and whatnot, and he's kind of been having that persona now for, which is very refreshing. But yeah, I mean, to see him actually having a good time with any musician, right? Really was same as when he was on the road with his wife. I mean, he's just sitting among musicians, just like, I just want to play guitar, and just having a good time.
And it's pretty neat watching him revisit some of those songs that I'm sure he has not, and he even says, I haven't played these in 40 years.
Right, since they recorded them.
But when you listen to some of that stuff now, because this was his New York time frame, right? He was in Berlin and New York and, doing all this stuff with some of the quote unquote new wave people at the time and that whole New York scene, with Blondie and the Roaches. And
And
it's just interesting to hear some of those songs again in the light of where he was, and they do have kind of a little punky when You Burn Me Up, I'm a Cigarette is kind of like that's a CBGB's kind of song.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, and all those, and then I mean, I just thought it was such a cool mix of songs with the Sacred songs and then the Exposure ones. But yeah, Burn Me Up, I'm a Cigarette, and I'm like, it sounds. The thing that blew me away the most is like Daryl Hall sounds exactly the same, like exactly. Even the I mean, I have all the music equipment too. You can make anything sound like anything, but his voice is still there. But like You Burn Me Up with a Cigarette, I mean, it sounded there. Or the a couple of the other tunes too. It was like you sound NYCNY from I mean, it sounded exactly the same. His voice sounds exactly the same.
And it's so funny that they both said, we haven't played these since we were in the
Yeah.
studio, because they were in. It's not Fripp never toured Exposure.
No,
right?
they never, other than Breathless, which Crimson played.
No, right,
later
but I mean,
on,
like he didn't go on a tour for that album, or
no, they never played any of those. I think Daryl has played a few of those songs.
Probably.
And I know in past Daryl Hall's years ago, they've done a couple of the Sacred songs because whoever the guest comes on is like, oh, I want to play this from Sacred Songs. He's like, oh, okay. And they do, but
not together.
Not together. And it was just, I mean, that band was just so good. You can see it on Robert's face, like NYCNY with those interlocking lines, and he was just like grinning from ear to ear, looking back and forth.
Well, and then they do Red.
Yeah. Oh,
Crimson's
well, I was waiting for Red. Okay. That's a whole.
Is Heroes? Do we talk about Heroes first?
I think we talk about Heroes, and it was interesting because Daryl Hall is. I mean, yeah. I'm not criticizing Daryl Hall at all, but he's been I guess I'll use the word star for so many years. He's not on the same plane as mere mortals, and I say that in a facetious manner because the way he talks,
he has that persona,
he has that air about him where he's just floating slightly above. And completely understand, and he's great. But when he was talking about Heroes, like we usually don't bring songs in, and Robert was a big part of that. But and that was like, oh, what's he going to do with this? And he kind of slowly went into it. But after the first couple of lines, it was like, whoa!
It was great.
I thought he freaking. The more the song went on, the more he got into it, and he freaking nailed that song.
He nailed it, and then but also watching them do it, Robert's guitar is iconic on that song,
and you really get to see that.
You get to see it
because that's all he was doing, and they were not doubling him. He was just doing that, and it was just so cool to see that. I've seen the videos online with Crimson too, but there's a lot going on with 3 drummers and all this. But
this was more just, I mean, and it just highlighted that guitar that he did on that song, which is sonically part of the fabric of that song, and just how it all holds together.
Yeah. It was just every song. And what else did they, Babs and Babs? I thought that was amazing. Fripp just sat there for most of the song and then went in for the Frippertronics part, which is cool. But then he kind of, then he started playing over at the end. And then the last thing they did, Farther, the Farther Away I Am, the way that the Sacred Songs, I thought that was freaking amazing too.
I think they did. I thought it was a lot of fun just to watch.
So Red.
So Red, I thought, was really cool.
I thought it was the wildest thing.
Because it's so different. I mean, it was the song.
It was the song.
But Daryl playing piano on top of it. It was like Keith Tippett was there. Or whatever, right?
Exactly. And it was funny because some people are commenting, oh, he's not playing the right chords. But actually, if you look, he's got an iPad on the piano. He's reading the music.
Yeah.
So, but I know what he was doing. He's playing the chord changes. And the problem is that is like the chord is the song, but then for other parts, they're playing things that are dissonant to that. And that's why. But to your point, it gave it that Keith Tippett. It gave that, and there were some lines where I'm like, "There's no," because Daryl said a couple of times, he emphasized,
"We've never played this song
We've never
before."
played that, and Robert told me Crimson takes 3 days to get this, and
here we go.
They went in and did it, and there were some parts where he was. So I don't know if they had played it, but he'd certainly listened to it because,
of course, they had to have listened.
There was
a
flow there, but I just thought it was the coolest thing because. Even when Crimson was, the last go around when they actually had a keyboard player, Bill Rieflin or Jeremy Stacy afterwards, they never really nobody was doing that. Like,
right.
on
they had
Red.
the other keyboard player, the synth player.
Yes, and he was
stuff, right? he was mimicking the lead lines,
right? But he put some organ in some places too, and I was like, oh, that sounds very cool too. But to hear Daryl in some of the spots, and you looked over, and it was funny because the angle they had sometimes, Daryl would play something cool, and then I'd see Robert's head turn and look at him because I was like, oh, that was a cool little lick he was playing.
But it was funny I watched it wrong because I just hit it on YouTube, and it's like just the clips show up. Yes. So I'm watching the clips out of order.
Okay,
so Red came up first, and that's what I saw first. And the way they filmed it, it's like you can't even see that there's a bass player there because he's like doesn't show up in most of the shots during Red, but he shows up later.
He does.
He's there, obviously.
He's there.
But I'm
like, you can hear him.
Yeah. I'm like, where's the bass player?
Yeah.
But he's behind the other keyboard player, and you never really see him playing.
I tell you, it was great to hear Red, all this stuff, but Red was cool because the Daryl's drummer there, he's not using much of a drum kit. He's not like a big, huge prog kit. I mean, it was 80% was just cymbal, hi-hat, snare, and he had a couple of toms, but he very rarely used those.
Too?
Yeah, the percussionist too, which was cool, but he was kind of laying back a little during Red, but there were some parts where then he'd be hitting the congas, and I was like, man, that just sounds so cool in there. The way they were doing that, it was like, and then at the end they were all like, whoa, they I mean, they you could tell they screwed up the coming out of the part, but they're all kind of laughing about it. But it was just like, whoa.
But I think that is part of the idea of this session, right?
Yeah,
they're playing. And they're just, this is
it's
what
playing,
it is.
Getting together.
It's live. It's making mistakes, whatever. And they're playing songs by people that they haven't, that's not like they said, we didn't practice this.
I mean,
we're just jumping in.
When are you going to hear those songs again?
It's true. Now that Crimson is allegedly.
I know. I don't know. I mean, stranger things have happened. Maybe this will put the fire under Robert's butt. He'll do like
Robert
a solo
will do
thing.
Something else.
Yeah, or he'll do something
because
else.
I think maybe who knows? I don't know. The inner workings of Robert Fripp's head, but the idea in the past is he puts this group together and they create this music, and there's always got to be like a new reinventioning of themselves, and they're playing and they're creating music, right?
Yep.
This was more like, let's play these songs, but let's not practice and let's just go for it. And I think it looked like he was having a fantastic time.
Yeah, and I think
Daryl too. Daryl was like,
oh yeah, and
I haven't watched the other show, so I don't really know what he's like with these other people.
Yeah.
For all I know, he's exactly the same with everybody.
Yeah.
Or this was like, or he was like genuinely like, that was awesome. We got to do this again.
Yeah, I haven't watched. There's maybe 4 or 5 of this season. I know there's one with the guy from Squeeze, Glenn Tilbrook. So he does one with him. Think he does one with Tommy Shaw.
I saw that
and
on
there's
the list, but I didn't know which were new, which were
one,
old.
But so I don't know. I don't know. Like, it's different now because it's in a different setting. I'm used to the years ago ones where it was a different setting, different band. Some people who've passed on, but it was just a different kind of, slightly different kind of vibe. This
band was good.
Yeah,
I really liked.
No, this band was really good, and actually they all I was just very impressed that they would just nothing was over the top. Like, the keyboard dude had one keyboard, but he was doing a lot of stuff. The drummer didn't have this huge ass kit, Neil Peart kit going around the sun, and they were all just kind of in sync. Clearly,
the music they picked to play was not that kind of music anyway.
No,
right? So they didn't pick in the Court of the Crimson King to play. They played Red, which is a 3-piece, generally
exactly a trio kind of power trio tune. But the song selection was just great. That was just a lot of fun,
enjoyable.
So
we recommend it.
2 thumbs up. If you haven't seen that, then go just turn off this darn podcast and go watch it. Run to Daryl's house, and it'll be interesting to see what happens next. All right. That's a lot.
That was a lot.
Yeah, that was a lot. I think it's November. That was like there was we haven't recognized other Tubular Bells, which we spent a lot of time on it. 73 Pink Floyd, 73 was a huge year. I'm bummed we missed 72, but hey.
Yeah, we can still talk about.
Well, we'll get to 79, and we'll really start rocking with Tormato and Love Beach, right?
Oh, that was 78, but it's okay.
78.
Not to correct you, but I'm correcting you.
Then excuse me. Then that would be Works Volume 2.
Yeah, right.
that whole getting into the 80s era. Yeah. But that's another time, another place. All right. Well, thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on
Prog will find a way.
If you want it to.